Well, good morning. Welcome to another webinar from North Road Investment Council. My name is Marshall McAlister, President and Portfolio Manager. I am really happy to have David Connell with Connell Associates join me for this conversation on wills for Canadians in Mexico. This is an interesting topic that I think more and more of our clients need to know more about. We're going to be heading down to Mexico for the second round of workshops. We're going to be in the Puerto Vallarta area on the 26th of January, and then up to Punta Mita that later that evening, and then over to Mazatlan on the 28th, and then Playa del Carmen on the 30th. Looking forward to seeing our Canadian clients in Mexico last week in January, and really hoping that you'll enjoy this conversation with David and what he was able to teach me about needing a will for a Canadian in Mexico. Well, David, I'm happy to welcome you to our webinar. I am really interested to find out more about a legal will and kind of some of the legal work that you're doing for Canadians in Mexico. First off, I want to ask, what's a guy from California doing in Mexico?
Well, I grew up in San Diego, and I had political family in Baja California, and I spent all of our family spent all of our free time traveling Mexico. And when I was studying at San Diego State, I had the opportunity to work with an attorney in Mexico who was both Mexican and American. Liked what he was doing. I was interested in real estate and development in Mexico. And he was the one that told me, he said, why don't you go to law school in Mexico instead of wasting your time in San Diego State? So
Yeah.
I ended up going to law school in Mexico City. Lived there for 5 years. We still have an office in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Worked in the area of mostly boutique corporate law and fiscal law, but really wanted to get back to the coastal areas and work with principally with foreigners that want to own a piece of Mexico, live in Mexico, and all those questions that they have and sometimes have trouble getting answered.
Yeah. So you and I have met. I mean, we've got friends in common, and I don't know if you know this, but you are the reason behind me owning a smoker because you hosted an American Thanksgiving event down in Nuevo, and that turkey that you served that day was amazing. So Brenda and I we came back to Canada, we picked up a smoker, and we've smoked no less than at least it must be close to 5 or 6 turkeys already now. So it's amazing.
Well, anybody's in Puerto Vallarta that wants to come by, we do a big thing here. You've been there, and I know it's a lot of fun. So yeah, no, good. I'm glad you're smoking turkeys.
Yeah. I don't think enough people from Canada know much of they haven't experienced Mexico City. You went to school there, you traveled there. It's a great city, right?
I love Mexico City. Yeah, it was tough from a kid from growing up on the beach in Southern California to move to Mexico City, but it is still to this day one of my favorite cities to go back to and spend time in. And I
Yeah.
get to go there every couple months. So
Yeah. So I guess for my client's interest, David is the guy that if we have a question in that's connected to law in Mexico, he's our first call. I asked David to sit with me for a few minutes just to talk about the will and Mexico and when might a Canadian need to create a will in Mexico. So can you talk us through the situation with a typical Canadian that would own property in one of the coastal communities in Mexico?
sure. No, we have a lot of people come in and ask us that question when they buy property or purchase other assets, whether they're investing down here in some type of financial institution or buying property. We always ask them to first give us a list of the assets they have. The reason we want to do this is because some of your assets are going to be held in trusts, and some of your assets are going to be held in deeds or things that are not trusts, so like car titles, boat titles, property outside of the restricted zone. Mexico has this thing they call the restricted zone, which is 50 kilometers from any ocean and 100 kilometers from any border. In that area, foreigners cannot acquire deeded direct title to property. They have to do it through a trust. So those types of trusts, and a lot of the financial institutions that have investments, they use trusts too. So we ask them that question: what do you own and how's the title held? If it's held in a trust, most of the time, we'll take a look at the trust, because most trusts, not all, but most trusts ask that secondary beneficiaries are set up in the case of passing of the first beneficiaries. This is great. It makes things really easy, because if the first beneficiaries pass away, the trustee is going to turn around and say, okay, secondary beneficiaries, provide me with the death certificates of the primary, give me instructions that you're the secondary beneficiaries and show me your ID. And there might be a notarization or some paperwork that needs to be done, but no probate. It transfers right to the secondary beneficiary. If it's not held in a trust, you do have to go through probate. And so we want to know, if you have a deed, say in San Miguel de Allende or Chapala or, Mexico City, Guadalajara, those deeds are usually not going to be held in trust. You're going to have a deed to that property.
Again, because these are outside of the 50-kilometer zone, right?
Yeah, this restricted zone. So yeah, that's basically the first question we ask. We want to get a list of those assets and see if it's necessary. If we find that you have like a lot of people that live in Puerto Vallarta, they have their property in a trust, they have a bank account that's a type of a trust where they name a secondary beneficiary, and we say, listen, there's no need to set up a will. I mean, the bigger assets you have are taken care of. But if they say, well, I've got a car, I've got something in San Miguel, I have some other investments that are not in trusts, we look at setting up a will for them.
Okay. Can you talk about probate and the fees connected to probate in Mexico? Is it connected to asset levels and a percentage like we would see in some provinces in Canada, or is it a flat fee?
No, well, so the inheritance, if you're a tax resident of Mexico, there's no tax on inheritance. If you're a non-tax resident, you have to look and see what's taxable and what's not taxable. A lot of times, the transfer is not taxable, but the procedure, we are a civil law country, Latin civil law country, so we do have a formal procedure at the courts. It is actually a litigation that you have to go through, a type of litigation. It's a probate litigation, where you actually have to go in and petition a judge, a civil court judge, to either open a will or determine that there's not a will and proceed with the probate proceedings. So we get the question of how much is it going to cost to do a probate. We're going to first ask, is there a will? Is it the last will? Is it registered? Is it done properly? We get through that step. And if there's a properly done will, the procedure can be done in 6 months to a year and a half at the most. If there's not a will, we have to go through what's called intestate, no will, and we have to, it's a little more of a lengthy process, because we do have to do certain publications. Those publications need to be broadcast for a certain amount of time, and we have to wait to see if anybody shows up to claim either a right as an heir or a right as a creditor to the estate. So it's unfortunately, probate proceedings, that's why a lot of countries like the US and Canada have trusts institutions, because it gets you kind of around the probate. The assets can be held in that trust, and you don't have to do a formal court probate proceedings.
So in the situation where you are the last surviving spouse and you have multiple children, and in your wishes in your estate, you do not want to give a fractional ownership to each of your kids in the real estate that you own in Mexico, could that be a reason to have a will in Mexico for that real estate property?
Oh, correct. No, so yeah, if you don't have a will and there's an asset that's going to be divided, the law is going to, depending on the state, is going to divide that asset up between the surviving spouse and children percentage-wise, depending on the number of children and several factors. If you do have a will and say, I want this asset to go just to my wife and the kids don't get a percentage of it, or I want this asset to go just to this child, the only way you can do that is through a will.
in Mexico.
in
So if I
Mexico.
had a will in Canada and I brought that down to the Mexican courts, does that stand, or do we need that next level of documentation in Mexico to make things much smoother?
The general answer is that Canadian will stands. Um, but that's because Mexico recognizes international law, which would include any wills that were done in Canada. The problem comes when you go through the procedural court process, because a judge down here is going to say that a will needs to take on a certain form, and there's several different forms that the law puts out. And if it doesn't meet that form, it's not considered a will. So then you have a
Mhm.
head scratcher of, like, I know in Canada, a handwritten will is valid. We've had to
Yeah.
deal with that a couple times. And Mexico just says, no, that doesn't meet the formality of any of these wills. And we have one of the heirs attempt to get that will in Canada disregarded.
Mm.
And then there's a whole debate of bringing down experts from Canada to determine whether or not the will's right, and then the judge in Mexico finally making the determination based on expert witnesses. It just creates you take a probate proceeding that could be, if you had a will in Mexico, that 6 months to a year and a half. We've seen some of these battles go on for five plus years,
Yeah.
when they're trying to interpret a foreign will in Mexico.
Okay. David, can you talk about financial assets or even investment properties and how that connects to the will for Canadians?
Correct. Most when you go and invest with a bank or a financial institution or an exchange house, any of those, um, foreigners should ask, can I designate a second beneficiary? And I'm going to say in the majority of them, those financial institutions will have an area for a secondary beneficiary. Most of those contracts are some type of a trust. And if the person selling you the product, the financial product, doesn't tell you about it and you ask about it, they're going to go, okay, yeah, here's the forms you need to fill out for the secondary beneficiary. Those
Yeah.
are very important to fill out. That's a question you should always ask when you're investing, because you do want to fill those out. And you want to have record of that, because the financial institution or bank is, if you pass, is going to go to the person that you designated, and they're going to be the new beneficiary of that account or that
Yeah.
investment. And we have seen several times where a kid comes down from the US or Canada and says, I am the heir of everything, including these accounts that my father and mother listed that they had in Mexico. And we
Yeah.
go to the bank, and the bank says, well, you know what? They listed the house manager here in Mexico as the secondary beneficiary.
Mm.
And the money went to the secondary beneficiary, and the bank threw its hands up and says, that's what the owners wanted to do. That's what they did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's an
And in the
important one.
Yeah, so in the case where you are the last surviving spouse and either you have, multiple kids that aren't going to kind of equally receive the assets, I would suggest that, getting this planned out in advance is super important.
Yeah, it definitely, the estate planning you need to have when you're acquiring assets, you need to think about who my secondary beneficiaries are. If the financial institution says no, we don't designate secondary beneficiaries, then you are going to want to adjust your will or create a will for that asset.
All right. So talk to me about like how you work with Canadians and maybe in what locations are you kind of doing the work? We know it's Puerto Vallarta. What other areas are you practicing?
So we've been in Puerto Vallarta and Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo, which is it's another tourist destination in the state of Guerrero, farther south, for 30 years. We're also in Mexico City. And
Okay.
over those 30 years, we have a lot of good relationships in basically every tourist area. Some of the people that have worked
Okay.
in my firm are in Playa del Carmen. I have a partner in another business who's a well-known attorney in Cabo San Lucas. We have people in Puerto Escondido, Huatulco, basically all of the Riviera Maya to San Miguel de Allende. For the last 30 years, we've been working with foreigners, principally Canadians and Americans coming down. So we have offices in Puerto Vallarta and Ixtapa, Zihuatanejo, and if a client comes to us and says, hey, I've got something in Mazatlan or a Cabo, we'll probably refer them to somebody that we've been working with comfortably for years in that, and
Okay.
especially for the specific type of work that they're looking for.
Yeah, very good. So at the end of this interview, I'm just going to post your contact information, so our clients can see your website and a phone number, and any clients that are needing to pick my brain about the work that you're doing, happy to receive your call, and I'll make an introduction down to David and his team in Mexico. David, thank you for taking a few minutes and hanging out with me on this topic. It's really important. More and more Canadians are heading your way, as you're seeing, and the planning isn't as simple as it might seem at the outset.
Well, thank you, Marshall. And yeah, like I said, it's when you're in a new country, it's a little daunting at the beginning, but once you get your feet under you and get stuff going, you become familiar with it. And I look forward to seeing you down here. And our webpage is there. We've got more information on our webpage and articles about different things in Mexico. I'll be happy to help anybody that's coming down here to buy, invest, and enjoy Mexico.
Great. Have yourself a great day, and yeah, we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.